All right, so are you ready to dive into something a little bit different today?
Yeah.
We're exploring the world of speed seduction.
Yeah.
And trust me, it's as intriguing as it sounds.
Yeah.
We've got a collection of audio recordings featuring the gurus of this, let's call it a movement.
Okay.
And I can already tell it's going to be a wild ride,
I'm
bro.
sure.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how this community treats seduction almost like a science
Yeah.
with its own unique language and techniques.
Right.
We're going beyond typical dating advice here.
Right.
These recordings give us a peek into a subculture obsessed with decoding the secrets of attraction.
So we're talking about speed seduction.
Right.
It's all about quickly building attraction and rapport.
Yeah.
But what are these secret weapons they're using?
It's a blend of psychology, NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming,
Okay.
and believe it or not, even some elements of mysticism.
NLP,
Yeah.
mysticism. This is
Ah.
already more complex than I imagined. Could you break down NLP for me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
NLP is essentially the study of how our thoughts, language, and behavior patterns interact.
Okay.
These experts believe they can influence those patterns,
Right.
creating an almost irresistible charm.
Intriguing, but I'm still hung up on the mysticism part.
Okay.
How does that fit into the equation?
Well, one speaker, we'll call him H,
Okay.
claims he can analyze a woman's personality
Okay.
just by shaking her hand.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
A simple handshake reveals all that.
He claims a firm handshake suggests someone upfront and strong,
Okay.
while a handshake that presses into the palm hints at a secretive nature.
Wow.
Of course, whether this is accurate is debatable,
Right.
but the point is to use it as a conversation starter,
Okay.
setting himself apart from other guys.
Right.
He even has a technique called the hand-hold interrupt,
Interesting.
where he smoothly transitions from the handshake into palm reading by continuing to hold her hand.
Palm reading. That's not something you typically associate with dating advice.
Well,
So he's using this mystical route to pique her interest, I guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
He and another expert named Kamal are big believers in incorporating mystical language
Right.
and practices like palm reading and energy work
Yeah.
to create an aura of intrigue. It's about tapping into something deeper than just surface-level attraction.
This energy work sounds fascinating.
Uh-huh.
What exactly is that?
Essentially, it involves manipulating the energy they believe flows within and between people.
Right.
One technique they describe is an energy massage pattern, where they guide a woman through a visualization of energy flowing through her body.
And this is supposed to be seductive.
They claim it creates an incredibly intense, almost trance-like experience.
Wow.
Och even tells a story about trying this on a group of strippers,
Really?
with some apparently mesmerized by the experience.
That's a pretty unconventional setting
Yeah.
to test out your seduction techniques. So they're using these practices to create a heightened emotional state.
Exactly.
It's
They
like-
want to create an experience that goes beyond the usual
Okay.
pickup lines and small talk.
Yeah.
Now, this brings up some interesting ethical questions,
Right.
but we'll delve into those a bit later.
Okay, so handshakes, palm reading, energy work.
Uh-huh.
It's all a bit out there, but also surprisingly creative.
Yeah.
What other unconventional approaches do they have up their sleeves?
One analogy that really stood out to me was the encyclopedia versus romance novel comparison.
Oh, interesting.
They argue that many men fall into one of these categories.
Okay.
Dependable but dull, like an encyclopedia,
Right.
or exciting but temporary, like a romance novel.
So are they trying to position themselves as the romance novel guy?
Exactly.
Okay.
They use this analogy to appeal to women in long-term relationships,
Right.
framing themselves as the thrilling escape from the mundane.
I can see how that would be appealing to someone stuck in a dream relationship.
Yeah.
But is it ethical to essentially encourage infidelity?
That's a great point.
You
And
know,
it gets even more complicated when you consider that one speaker even boasts about seducing a married woman
really?
who hadn't been intimate with her husband in months.
Wow, that definitely raises some red flags.
Yeah.
It seems like these techniques could be used for good or bad, depending on the user's intentions.
Absolutely.
Right.
We're going to need to unpack that further as we continue our deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the techniques,
Right.
but also about considering their potential consequences.
Speaking of unconventional approaches,
Yeah.
they also talk about the concept of a woman's beauty being a mask
Right.
that hides her true self.
Yes.
Okay.
They believe that by verbally removing the mask,
Right.
they can connect with a woman on a deeper, more authentic level.
Interesting.
They're trying to get past the surface and tap into something more genuine.
That's a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
But how do they actually remove the mask?
It involves using specific language and techniques to bypass her defenses
Okay.
and create a sense of vulnerability.
So it's like they're acknowledging the objectification inherent in that environment and trying to connect on a human level.
Right.
But I can't help but wonder if it's truly genuine
Yeah.
or just another manipulative tactic.
It's definitely a blurry line.
Right.
And that's something we need to keep in mind as we explore these techniques further.
Right.
The potential for manipulation is definitely there.
So you've got handshakes, palm readings, energy massages, the mask concept.
Yeah.
It's clear that speed seduction goes way beyond your typical dating advice.
It's about pushing boundaries,
Right.
using psychology and even a touch of mysticism to create attraction.
And as we've seen, it's not without its ethical dilemmas.
Yeah.
So how do these experts justify their methods? And how can we apply any of these insights to our own lives without crossing the line?
Right.
That's what we'll be exploring as we continue our deep dive into speed seduction. It's amazing how deep they go with this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like they've created a whole system for decoding human interaction.
Right.
But some of it seems pretty out there.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even begin to incorporate these techniques into your life?
Well, they stress that simply memorizing lines or mimicking gestures won't get you very far.
Right.
It's about internalizing these principles,
Okay.
becoming congruent with the persona you're projecting.
So it's not about putting on an act,
Right.
but more about cultivating a certain mindset.
Exactly. They call it congruency,
Okay.
being genuine in your belief and actions,
Right.
embodying the seductive persona rather than just faking it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're not convinced by your own game, no one else will be.
Right. And that ties into another key concept,
Okay.
state control.
Okay.
They believe in using techniques from NLP and other disciplines
Right.
to maintain a positive internal state no matter what's happening externally.
So even if they get rejected, they can bounce back quickly without letting it affect their confidence.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's about reframing negative experiences
Okay.
and staying in a confident, attractive state of mind.
Right.
They compare it to an actor staying in character,
Right.
regardless of what's happening off stage.
That level of mental discipline is pretty impressive,
Yeah.
but it also makes me wonder, where does the real person end and the persona
Yeah.
begin?
Right?
It sounds like a lot of work.
That's the paradox of speed seduction.
Yeah.
It's about becoming a master of your own emotions and perceptions,
Right.
but also about using those skills to influence others.
Okay, so they're talking about congruency, state control,
Uh-huh.
but how does all of this actually play out in a real-world interaction?
Right.
Do they have specific strategies for approaching women?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They spend a lot of time discussing the importance of reading body language.
Oh, okay.
It's about recognizing those subtle cues
Yeah.
that indicate interest or disinterest from a woman.
So it's not just about what you say, but how you read the situation.
Exactly.
Okay.
They talk about observing a woman's body positioning, eye contact,
Right.
even how she interacts with their friends.
Okay.
For example, they claim a woman sitting alone at a bar,
Okay.
facing outward and turned away from her group,
Okay.
is a clear sign she's open to being approached.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
I never would have thought to look for that.
Right.
But what about women who are already in relationships?
Yeah.
Do they address that?
It's definitely a controversial aspect of their teachings.
Okay.
They do talk about approaching women who are already with men,
Okay.
but they advise observing the couple's interaction first. If the woman seems distant or unresponsive to her partner,
Right.
they see it as a potential opportunity.
Hold on. Isn't that encouraging guys to swoop in and take advantage of a potentially vulnerable situation?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
It's definitely a slippery slope ethically.
Right.
They argue that it's all about reading the signals correctly.
Right. If the woman backs away or clearly indicates she's not interested,
Right.
then you walk away.
Okay.
They emphasize respecting boundaries,
Okay.
but their definition of those boundaries seems flexible?
It sounds like they're walking a fine line between confidence and disrespect.
Yeah.
But even if you can read the signals perfectly,
Right.
isn't there always a risk of a confrontation with a jealous boyfriend?
They acknowledge that risk,
Okay.
but they also believe that taking calculated risks is part of the game.
Okay.
They have a run-the-numbers mentality,
Okay.
meaning that not every approach will be successful.
Right.
But the more women you approach,
Yeah.
the higher your chances of finding someone receptive.
So it's all about playing the odds.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
But they also emphasize that every interaction, even a rejection,
Okay.
is a learning opportunity.
Okay.
It's about refining your skills,
Okay.
becoming more attuned to social dynamics,
Right.
and developing that unshakable confidence.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah.
But how do they go from those initial interactions to building a genuine connection?
They believe that internalizing those techniques is key.
Okay.
They compare mastering seduction to a seasoned vaudeville performer
Okay.
spending years perfecting a 10-minute act.
Right.
It's about honing your skills until they become second nature,
Okay.
an unconscious expression of your personality.
So it's less about using tricks and more about becoming the type of person who naturally attracts others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about confidence,
Yep.
charisma,
Yeah.
and the ability to connect with people on an emotional level.
But even if you buy into the whole personal development aspect of it,
Yeah.
there's still that nagging question of authenticity.
Right.
If you're always on,
Yeah.
always playing a role,
So
where does the real you fit in?
that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's one we'll have to keep in mind
Oh,
as
no.
we explore some of their more advanced techniques.
It's wild to think about these guys spending years perfecting these techniques.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're treating seduction as a performance.
Yeah.
But if it's all a performance, where does the genuine connection come in?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
They talk about a technique called the slow burn approach,
Okay.
where instead of rushing in, they gradually build up rapport and curiosity over time.
So it's more about subtlety and intrigue than an immediate pickup attempt.
Exactly.
Okay.
They might frequent a particular bar or social setting,
Yeah.
interact with a woman casually, make her laugh,
Right.
and then leave without even asking her name.
So they're leaving her wanting more, sparking her curiosity.
Precisely.
Right.
By the time they do initiate a more direct interaction,
Yeah.
the woman is already intrigued and receptive.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
It plays on the psychology of anticipation.
Uh-huh.
But does that approach actually lead to deeper connections?
Yeah.
Or is it just a way to manipulate someone's emotions?
They believe it creates a stronger foundation for a relationship.
Okay.
But I think that's up for debate.
Right.
They also emphasize the importance of being adaptable,
Right.
reading the situation,
Right.
and responding accordingly.
So it's not just about following a script,
Right.
but more about being in the moment
Mm.
and adjusting your approach based on the woman's cues.
Absolutely.
Okay.
They describe having a toolkit of techniques
Yeah.
drawing on different approaches
Right.
depending on the context.
Right.
They compare it to a jazz musician improvising,
Right.
responding to the flow of the music.
It's fascinating how they blend psychology, NLP, and those mystical elements we discussed into their seduction strategy.
Right.
It's like they're hacking the human mind.
They talk about using embedded commands,
Okay.
anchoring techniques,
Right.
and even guiding women through visualizations
Mm.
to enhance their experience and create a stronger emotional connection.
Embedded commands, that sounds almost subliminal.
It's a way of subtly influencing someone's thoughts or behavior
Okay.
through the language you use.
Right.
They're using these techniques to bypass conscious resistance
Okay.
and tap into the power of the subconscious mind.
That sounds pretty powerful and a little bit scary, to be honest.
Right, there's definitely a potential for misuse.
Yeah.
One speaker even describes whispering poetry into women's ears in crowded bars,
Yeah.
creating an intimate bubble amidst the chaos.
Poetry.
Yeah.
That's unexpected.
Yeah.
How does that work as a seduction technique?
They believe it can evoke strong emotions,
Okay.
create a sense of connection,
Right.
and transport someone to a different state of mind.
Right.
It's about using language to create a powerful sensory experience.
So it's not just about the words themselves,
Right.
but about the emotions they evoke and the atmosphere they create.
Exactly. It's about using language as a tool for seduction,
Okay.
painting a picture with words,
Yeah.
and drawing the woman into your world.
That's pretty artistic, actually.
Yeah.
I can see how that could be very effective,
Yeah.
but also, as we've been saying,
Right.
it all comes down to intention.
Absolutely. These techniques can be used to build genuine connections or to manipulate and exploit.
Right.
It's up to each individual to decide how they want to use this knowledge.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've explored some pretty unconventional techniques and concepts.
Yeah, we've gone from analyzing handshakes to exploring the power of the subconscious mind.
Right.
And we've encountered quite a few ethical dilemmas along the way.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways from this wild ride through the world of speed seduction?
I think the biggest lesson is that communication is an incredibly powerful tool.
Right.
Whether you're trying to attract a partner, negotiate a deal,
Yeah.
or simply connect with someone on a deeper level,
Yeah.
understanding the dynamics of human interaction can make all the difference.
We've seen how psychology, NLP, and even a touch of mysticism can be used to create attraction and influence behavior.
Hmm.
But it's important to remember that with great power comes great responsibility.
It's up to each of us to use this knowledge ethically and respectfully.
Right.
Seduction ultimately should be about building genuine connections,
Yeah.
not about manipulating or exploiting others.
So as we wrap up this fascinating exploration of speed seduction, we leave you with this.
Okay.
How can you use these insights to improve your own communication and connections
Yeah.
while staying true to your values and respecting the boundaries of others?
Right.
That's the real challenge and the real reward.
Keep those minds open, keep exploring,
Right.
and most importantly, keep it ethical.
Until next time, happy diving.